How far are we? We are 10 videos deep in out of 23-ish. Got a lot of work to do.
You don't have that honeymoon period for very long, maybe 100 days, and you have to execute and prove that you deserve to win that election by fulfilling the promises to the American people.
In the eyes of many in the world, this every 4-year ceremony we accept as normal is nothing less than a miracle.
In America, we understand that a nation is only living as long as it is striving.
Only a few generations have been granted the role of defending freedom in its hour of maximum danger.
So again, so far, the thesis of all the videos so far is essentially, don't do crimes, do whatever Donald Trump tells you to do. If he hasn't told you to do something, imagine what would Trump do, WWTD. And please, for the love of God, don't do crimes. Those seem to be the main points of all the training videos so far.
This great nation will endure as it has endured, will revive and will prosper.
Also, if you
Whether
do
we go
crimes,
forward
we'll
together
find
with
you.
courage or turn back to policies that weakened our economy, diminished our leadership in the world, America's future will be in your hands.
But they're gonna do crimes, though? Yeah, but you know
Welcome
what?
to our Project 2025 transition.
They're really focused on, like, the first, 6 months in office. They want to get, the first 100 days, you know? I guess 3 months in office. But, once the gears are turning on, turning America fash, and undoing the administrative state, they're just gonna be able to start doing crimes because the president will ask them to do that and will also then pardon them. Once the process is ongoing, but maybe at the beginning there's some vulnerability,
Project and our training session today, why your service matters, how presidential appointees at all levels can impact policy. I'm Derek Morgan, Executive Vice President at the Heritage Foundation, and I'm joined today by Roger Severino, Vice President for Domestic Policy, and Aaron Walsh, who's our Senior Fellow in International Affairs at the Asian Studies Center. We're going to be talking today about why it's important to be aligned in an administration, why you should serve, and the impact that you can have. And so with that, I think we'll get started right away with introductions and where we served in administrations. All three of us served different presidents, some of us multiple presidents. We'll get to that. I served for 4 years for Vice President Dick Cheney as his staff secretary and special counsel and assistant to vice president. It was an excellent experience, and I'm sure we'll get into that a little later. But Roger, why don't we start with you, and where did you serve?
I was in the Trump administration as director of the Office for Civil Rights at Health and Human Services, HHS. And before that, I was a trial attorney at the U.S. Department of Justice as a career. So I was able to see both sides, on the political and the career side.
Excellent. And Aaron, tell us, where did you serve?
Well, I started at the age of 18, so I've served 4 presidents.
Man, she really does
starting
look
with
like
Ronald
Liz
Reagan.
Truss, doesn't she?
When I was in college, I was at the Office of Correspondence, and then went on to Political Affairs, then went over to
it's
the Office
kind of
Protocol,
uncanny,
and
right?
served at Blair House, Department of Energy, and then in the Bush 40.
Yeah, by the way, that guy who talked before her is evil because he headed civil rights under Trump. What kind of civil rights do people who serve under Donald Trump believe in?
And I served up the U.S. mission to the UN for 5 years. And then in 43, I came back and was at the State Department in Near Eastern Affairs Bureau. And then during the Trump administration, I was at the White House. And then over to as Assistant Secretary at Department of Commerce, and then came back to the White House at the National Security Council.
That's fantastic. Well, we're going to be the beneficiaries
That's
of all of our
fantastic.
experiences here as we talk about it. I want
I
to start with
sincerely
Roger. I'll
believe
start
that.
with you on motivation. What was it that encouraged you to make that step to kind of put your hat in the ring to try to serve the President of the United States?
Well, the opportunity to impact policy at a wholesale level. When I was an attorney at DOJ, it was representing the United States, which is an amazing privilege, but for individual cases. And I moved from individual cases to large-scale national policy, and having that impact at such a broad scale, where you could see your ideas impact so many people for good, was an opportunity I just could not pass up. And it turned out to be more impactful even than I imagined.
What ideas?
Because one of the things I realized is that it's so few people in positions of authority that are making these important decisions. And I really wanted to be a part of that.
Fantastic. And Aaron, what is it that drew you? I'm sure part of it was President Ronald Reagan himself, who was such an influence on so many of us. In addition to that, what made you think, well, I should go work for the president?
So I had an opportunity to go and do that when I was in school. And then I'd heard the second inaugural address that the president did. I was just bundled up with a few friends, and we went down to the mall and stood there and listened to the speech, and it was so inspiring. And
really
inspiring,
so
I got involved, just volunteer work, and then got a real job in the Library and Research Center, and it just, being part of that administration was just incredible. And I mentioned to you earlier, just getting coffee or Xeroxing or doing anything you needed to do to be part of a team, because there's one leader, one principal, and that's the President of the United States, and everybody else is a support. And just to be part of that administration, and all the administrations, as a matter of fact, has been incredible.
Yeah, that's great. So there's a mix of really a lot of admiration for the person who's running, and certainly support of their policy agenda that all kind of comes into to the motivation. And Roger, you mentioned impact, and I wanted to drill down just a little bit on that. What kind of impact were you able to have, or should people expect to be able to have, maybe at multiple different levels?
In my particular role, I was a regulator and enforcer of our civil rights laws, conscience and religious freedom laws, and health and privacy laws as well.
Oh, okay. Religious freedom laws. Okay. The kind of laws the Trump administration used to say, essentially, if there's a gay person, you don't have to bake them a cake. You don't have to serve them food. You can deny them health care if you disagree with their lifestyle. As long as it's for religious reasons, you're fine.
That is unique. Not everybody has that role. However, most federal agencies do have a regulatory function. They issue regulations, and in many ways, unfortunately, that's how we are governed nowadays. Not so much through our laws, but through our regulations. And there's tremendous power if you work in a federal agency and you work in a regulatory role. There are other folks who work in an enforcement role, enforcing the laws, and there's others who work in actual distribution of federal benefits or federal programs or research and things like that. So there's all sorts of places for people to contribute, but I do think people should be quite aware of the impact of our regulations on daily life.
Yeah, that's so important. And Aaron, so you start off very, very young, and you were talking about being willing to help in any way that you can. How does your expectation of the impact you're going to be able to have, how does that change with time and with experience?
Sure. So my last role was at the National Security Council, and that's a very different role than obviously you start out with. And I came in and out of government, obviously, and I think the National Security.
It's so weird how you just kind of skim over what you were doing. Yeah, you were going in and out, just starting working government, then stopping again, almost like some kind of revolving door in politics between the lobbying class and lawmaking class. So interesting. It's almost like I don't know, you were being put in to do the bidding of billionaires. I'm just spitballing here.
The Security Council is very much of a policy process. So it's different than being part of the agencies. It's really more, if you didn't have a National Security Council running this type of process, so the policies are made. I mean, the president drives the policy, but there's a whole system and process that's in place in order to follow that. And I think that is something that level of discipline that people have to have is very important. And because what is presented by the National Security Council to the president is where he has his options and can make a decision. And so that's quite critical.
it is. And, you know, I think back on my own service, and you're never quite sure what your impact is, but on a day-to-day basis, one of the jobs I had was staff secretary. And so I had the job for Vice President Cheney that he actually did for President Ford.
And you know a Cheney guy, like, has some skeletons in his closet, you know? Like, yeah, I actually did the dirty work for Vice President Cheney. You know, it's one of the proudest moments of my life, carrying water for that guy. Oh, man. Okay.
And I knew that within my scope of control was making sure that all the briefings that he got were completely factually correct and had all of the relevant information, perhaps multiple points of view fairly presented. And, you know, you had the satisfaction of knowing that you've given the principal the very best information.
Could I add two stories of impact?
Satisfaction of a job well done.
During COVID, so much of the federal government was, in the beginning, in almost a mode of panic. And being there during that moment, those who kept a level head made a
terracotta
tremendous
army,
difference.
yeah.
There were a couple instances where civil rights laws were being threatened, particularly with the questioning of rationing of medical care. There was the idea that we're going to run out of ventilators. What are we going to do? Who's going to be?
This wasn't a hypothetical that, like, never came to pass. Like, we did run out of these things. We did have to ration medical care because, you know, people were dying. This was the entire reason why we adopted like mask mandates and vaccine mandates, and you know, the entire reason was because our hospital systems were being so overwhelmed. People were being, like, kept in coolers because we couldn't bury the bodies fast enough, you know? Like, we had, like, temporary tent hospitals set up in parks in major cities across the country. Like, it's not like this was a thing that people just, oh man, you know, this could have happened. No, like, it did happen. It did happen, and conservatives, frankly, don't think it was a big deal. They don't think it was a big deal when they had to, like, bring in, like, 30,000, like, nurses into New York City because, like, everyone was so sick. They ran out of space in hospitals. Like, my God, like, I don't know. I think that one of the greatest things that we should hold the right to account for is the way that they just consistently talk about how nothing really big happened with COVID. It was just like a cold. Like, over 1 million people died. Over 1 million people died. Like, it's a big deal. It's like a nuclear bomb going off in a part of America, you know? Like, it's crazy. Yeah, we literally have mass graves from COVID. I don't know. The way it's all downplayed to conservatives is sickening to me.
We choose to live or to die? Those questions. And again, it was a very scary time in our history. Some states had triage policies that would put people with disabilities, particularly Down syndrome, at the back of the line and make them flatly ineligible. And the civil rights office that I led at the time became active on the issue, and through our enforcement powers convinced states to drop those discriminatory policies. Right? So that had real world impact at a very scary time. And another example was same thing during COVID. After the lockdowns, people were not going back to hospitals. Beds were trying to be reserved for the most sick, and people were not receiving medical care. There was a question as to whether they could use their iPhones or use Skype, et cetera, to get telehealth, because those devices were not HIPAA compliant. My office was the HIPAA regulator. Well, we issued guidance saying that we would not be enforcing it in that manner, and I believe we actually saved lives and helped transform telemedicine, because so many thousands of people were talking to their doctors when they otherwise were afraid to go to the medical centers and hospitals. And I'm sure we probably found people who were showing their doctors with their iPhone, hey, what is this?
My best friend coughed so hard he had blood ruptures in his lungs. Cough so hard for days, my asthma triggered. Just a cold, my left tit. Yeah. Also, my God, I'm sorry to hear that, Kiwi Bird. I'm annoyed the Biden administration stopped taking COVID seriously. Yeah, I feel like there are some pretty common sense ways we could change how we handle COVID right now to make it, like common sense reforms that would allow people to, still go to work, but we could I don't know, we could still have policies about how if you're sick with it, you can stay the fuck home. Like, the fact that we don't have that is pretty weird to me. Like, the whole you don't even have to quarantine yourself if you get COVID anymore. That's weird to me. Like, it's still a big deal. But I guess the threat of overwhelming our hospitals is not quite as big as it used to be, but still. Maintaining the free vaccines. Oh, are they not free anymore? Did I miss that news story? I have COVID right now. Thanks to the vaccine, I'm not dying. Hell yeah! Up top for not dying.
Mole, and turns out it may have been cancer. It goes to show you'll never know where your public service may take you, but you could even have life-saving impact.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I was thinking about this in my own experience, which is, particularly as a more junior level person or when you start out, you have to do your work really excellently. And then before you know it, someone turns to you and asks for your opinion on something. And that's when you can have an impact. And so it just, as in life, we should make sure that we're doing the very best job we can. And sometimes they'll turn to you and say, well, what do you think, Roger? Or what do you think, Aaron?
So you worked for Vice President Cheney. Did the Vice President ever turn to you?
He did, yes. And he also taught me, he used to say this a lot. He'd say, I got this job because I didn't talk about the last job. So I probably shouldn't share everything. But I will share that there was a process for Presidential Medal of Freedom winners. And I got the first draft of the memo of everybody that I thought should win the award. And he ended up taking some of those suggestions straight to the president. So, you never know. When someone turns to you, ask for your advice, they might actually listen too. Aaron, I'd love to turn to you and talk and ask you that same question.
On the impact, I was just going to say, the religious freedom thing. It came to us. The president's going to speak at, every year at the UN, and so there was a lot of focus on religious freedom, and I thought it'd be wonderful if the president could speak at the UN. No president has ever done that on religious freedom. And at the same time, from both the domestic side and the international side, we were looking at this issue, and we all came.
Also, keep in mind whenever folks like this talk about this particular issue of religious freedom, what they're really talking about is, freedom to be Christian nationalists. Like, they want the freedom for Christianity to be supreme in the United States. They don't really want to fight for the religious freedom of, say, Muslims, That's not really their jam when they talk about religious freedom. They don't, not freedom, but not like that, Came
together and domestic policy and the NSC and really drove a religious freedom.
I work in a public school, and last year we started off with a month and a half of rolling COVID infections throughout staff. Nobody's taking it seriously anymore. Yeah. Which is too bad. It can cause permanent organ damage,
The president signed an EO and then went up and had heads of state. First time ever that a president has spoken on that issue. So it was really quite something very exciting.
That's fantastic. And so much of what the president does is leadership. And that's a huge step in leadership. Let me ask you both, because we'll probably have a lot of young people listening here, and they're wondering, you both were senior folks in the administration. What kind of people were you looking to hire? What were the top 2 or 3 things that you wanted to make sure were on target? Aaron, I'll start with you.
Sure, great. One of the things we were looking at is people that had experience to go into the different roles that they had in each of the department. I mean, every single department that we have has multiple layers of roles, everything from strategic communications to advanced to, in the national security side, a whole number of things on domestic policy side, the same thing. So we're looking for people that have had academic or real world experience in those areas, and then we look for someone that is supportive of the president's policies. They really have to be totally in line with the conservative policies that the president has
Yeah, again, listen to Trump or else you'll get fired. Yeah.
enunciated through the campaign, and then obviously through the administration. So that's the most important issue, and drive, interest in supporting and being a team player.
Yeah, you've really got to have all three of those to
Absolutely.
be effective. Roger, anything you'd add to that in terms of the folks that are listening to this? Like, how could I make myself more appealing to a mid or senior level person?
You have to be willing to be flexible and
You
willing
have
to
to be
sacrifice.
willing to sell out your morals.
A lot of people who come to these positions when they're young, they're full of energy, full of ideas, and they have to
Oh, that's
combine
great. I'm
that
sorry to hear that.
with a work ethic that's willing to take what comes, because these jobs are very fast-paced, they're very intense, but they are so
hope-
incredibly rewarding.
I hope
They're
a
an
lot
adventure.
of young people
when I
watch
would be
my
interviewing
content
folks
instead of
to work
this
under me,
without additional content.
they would. I'd get the typical questions. What's a day going to be like in this role?
Like, imagine being the kind of person they want watching this video. Like, I don't know, it's kind of chilling, right? Like, someone who's gonna nod along and be like, ah, yes, you need an absolute dipshit, an actual like sycophant who will do your every whim. Yes, I understand. That's me. It's talking about me. I'm that person.
And I would do my best to explain it, and then I would tell them, but a month from now, it's going to be radically different.
Yeah.
Because things are changing so fast, and people have to be comfortable with that. But I did tell them this. I said, I can't tell you what's going to happen 2 months from now, but I could guarantee you'll be telling your grandkids what you have done after you've served in the administration.
Yeah, so well said. And Aaron, since you got such an early start in your career, what are the kind of positions that somebody, even in
Trains and
college
bullshit. Thank you for
still, or
gifting Kiwi
maybe
Bird
just
a
recently
sub.
graduated, it's their first job, what kind of positions are there available in the administration at large for that type of person?
There are so many. I mean, I think timing is everything in terms of your ability to come into an administration. And even if you're still in college, you can find ways of trying to volunteer if you can in different areas, in different departments. Sometimes they take volunteers. They certainly had at the White House. And I think once you graduate from college, if you can get in if you graduate when a president comes in, or even a couple of years later, the first term or second term, there are jobs in policy, in scheduling, in advance, in strategic communications, and
Look, we need you to do all kinds of things, all right? Like, look, if you can handle scheduling a calendar, we need you, okay? If you can handle, looking around to talk to people at a venue, okay? We need you to do that. If you're good at, say, aiming an AK-47 in a violent situation, we need that too, all right?
in targeted areas
All
where you might
kinds.
have had an
All
opportunity
kinds.
to
We need 'em.
graduate from. So
If you work for an agency, then you're going to get a ton of expertise in a particular subject matter. So it could be FDA, it could be HUD, it could be housing policy, medicine, and that credential can go a long way because you will have that expertise that other people will not. The positions, as I mentioned, are intense, and you're going to be exposed to a tremendous array.
Well, why are they intense? Did COVID get better? Did COVID get really bad again? Is that why we're intense? Why are we intense? Are we going on a giant camping trip? Do we need to put the food in the trees because the bears are coming?
Of subject matters, but if you're in a
Think you can
particular
pull off the
agency,
Italian?
you
I
will
don't know
be
what that
ahead of your
means.
peers when it comes to getting jobs in that industry. There is a revolving door between government and industry, for good or for ill, and if you have that government experience, you get a whole lot of credibility right off the bat.
Yeah, and I'd point to one. I'm interested to get your reaction to this. We had great success in our office, Office of Vice President, hiring for folks that had taken entry-level jobs as confidential assistants. So we hired 2 confidential assistants to the director of the Peace Corps, of all things. And so because a confidential assistant is somebody that's got that dedication, that drive.
A confidential assistant is a secret assistant. Okay? So if you're my confidential assistant, we can't tell anyone about your job, all right? You're gonna be secret. You're gonna have a secret office behind a secret bookcase. Okay? It's gonna be in my office. You gotta pull, down the copy of Atlas Shrugged, all right? And that will open up the secret bookcase, and inside we'll have a little libertarian paradise, okay? Where I pay you sub-minimum wage, and you earn the privilege of working with me, one of the great men of history, okay? That's what we're talking about here.
Normally they've got that commitment, that excitement, and they're having to make a lot of personal sacrifices, because particularly in that particular case, they're all over the world traveling, and that's the person that's right by the side of the director, who's helping with everything from logistics to policy and everything else. That's a really good training ground, and it's also one where there's a premium on willing to sacrifice and having the kind of personality that would keep things in confidence and so forth. That's a really good training ground, and then you can go from there. You've shown that you're loyal and that you work hard and that you think on your feet and you can deal with a principal and all the people they're dealing with. So I would just put a plug in there for confidential assistance.
That's a really good point. I actually, Derek had hired someone right out of college who I had met a couple times and brought her in. And of course
Derek hired someone right out of college, okay? And let me tell you, she was really good at what she did. She was one of those confidential secretaries, and I never saw her after she was hired. And, she turned up like 8 months later, floating in a river somewhere. And, I don't know how she got from point A to point B, but everything worked out great with that job. I'm your average Republican.
She had had this big degree and everything, but she came in and it was just that. And she just grew and went to the different places that I went to and brought her along. And everything, as I said, from Xeroxing to practically going in and outside the Oval Office. And so you just never...
Girl, you dating yourself so hard right now, calling it Xeroxing? I'll be right back. I need to get new batteries. Don't you be wowing while I'm gone. I'm back, motherfuckers. Why does Jack have to hate on the gilfs? Hey, look, if you're into Liz Truss lookalikes, I mean, that's, no, I'm not kink shaming. Record time? Well, I was just getting batteries, guys. I didn't have to, wipe poop off my asshole.
Never know. The key is to be open and be flexible. As we had talked about, every door often opens that you never even expect.
Yeah, I think that's really spot on.
God closes a window,
hopefully you
opens a
land
door.
with somebody like Aaron or Roger, who's just really fantastic to work for. Because I know, speaking for me, hiring those younger people and then helping them, mentoring them, helping them find the next job as well is just one of the most rewarding things about public service. I would just say there's no job.
There's a lot of rewarding things about public service, particularly for us Republicans when we get out of public service and go into the private service, where we get paid lots of money as lobbyists, all right? It's a very rewarding career as long as you stick it out, play ball, and then when you get out, you can, be paid by a gigantic corporation. Pretty sweet gig.
Too small, serving in the
She's wearing a
administration.
pro
Go in
necklace. Oh no.
with both feet and you're going to find great reward.
And once you serve in one administration, you're credentialed to serve in another one, right?
Unless you're, a career.
That's one thing. There was an 8-year gap between Trump and the previous Republican administration, and we noticed that there was that gap in experience. So we really valued people who had the knowledge when they were there in the Bush years, because they knew how the place ran. And you can't underestimate how you could position yourself not only for working in industry, but going back into government later in your career.
Yeah, really well said. And so let me turn to lessons learned, because I'm sure there's things you know now that you probably wished you knew, Aaron, back when you were in grade school and started in your first administration. Or maybe in between your jobs, like going to the NSC, that's a new thing. Like, were there things that you learned there? I'm sure there were. But maybe one or two lessons learned, I'll start with you, Aaron, of things you wish you knew before you started.
I think really what I learned is, as Roger said, you don't know how flexible that you actually have to be.
Yeah.
Even though you might say, oh, I can be here 18 hours a day, and oftentimes you are or more. Just the pivoting from issue to issue, it's like going from lily pad to lily pad, and you've just got to be on it. So if
Mr. Anderson,
you can have anything thrown at you, and I think
thank you
the
for
flexibility
the
is something that's
10
really
gifted
important.
memberships. Look at you.
And also energy
YouTube
and
just
optimism,
absolutely
because some
delivering
days
this week.
things just fall apart at the seams, and you think it's your fault, or you think the thing is always keep thinking that you're just rowing the boat with everybody else. And I think optimism is key, and that goes back to leadership in every group. You don't have to be sitting at the White House
Mr. Anderson.
to feel like
Oh,
you're
God.
making an impact, because you're making an impact every place you are. You're part of an administration and part of a conservative movement.
Yeah, that's really great. And your lily pad analogy is a really good one. And another thing I think that is good going in is to really build that network of people that have a broad array of experience and knowledge that you can call on when you're there. It's like, I've been presented with this issue. Out of my comfort zone, but I bet I know 2 or 3 people I can call. Probably a lot of them work here at Heritage, wink, wink, or one of our 45 partner organizations.
That's right.
A lot of
and
us
so
work here
building
at
that network
Heritage.
before you go in is also critical.
And you do all along. As
We're
Roger
very
mentioned, coming in
influential.
and going out, like I personally have, and many people have. The people that I met at the beginning in the first administration, the second, the third, and the fourth, those are all people that you're going to know, even if you come from across the United States, which we really hope so many people do. It's not just a Washington inside the Beltway game. That's not what we're looking for. The next administration really wants people from across the United States. So even if you come for a couple of years and serve, or in the second part of an administration, everybody's welcome, and I think that's the things that you're bringing from the States is critical.
And the network is so important.
Mr. Anderson, thank you so
you
goddamn
have to
much.
be part of the conservative movement as a known quantity to a decision maker who will be able to hire you. And that's why this project is so important. We're trying to connect as many people to give them the tools so that they will be part of that network. So when the time comes, we will know that person is a known quantity, they're good, they're eager, they're qualified, let's bring them in to serve. Because one of the things you realize once you're in the administration is that time is your most precious commodity. You never have enough of it. You know you have 4 years or 8 years at best, which may sound like a lot, but we had 4 years, and we were counting the days, and towards the end it was so many things we thought, wow, if we only had more time. And that's one of the lessons is when you go in, prepare to work as fast as possible because the country's at stake and you only have a set amount of time. So use every day wisely.
Can I just say, these are supposed to be like training videos, right? But so much of the video substance comes down to make good choices and not bad ones. Use your time wisely. A lot of what this is just repetition of the core job that they want them to do. Be loyal. Don't be there for other reasons like money or fame. And don't do crimes, because we need you to remain functional in this position in order to ensure our takeover. And hey, guess what? Use common sense to do your job. Be able to write your full name. The structure that's here is extraordinarily limited because they are scraping the bottom of the barrel. They are looking for literally anyone, as long as they are willing to do this job. It doesn't matter what your skill set is, really. until you mentioned the salary, the thought of you being like a secret assistant and having a really secret office actually sounded kind of cool. Right? Like the government should have, wait, no, I should have a cool little secret office hidden by a bookcase. There we go. I actually don't want the government to have secret offices. I want me to have secret offices. There we go. I can write my full name. No. Hoi polloi. They made it very clear in that one video that they're perfectly fine with someone who has a criminal record as long as they seem willy sowy about it. You know, as long as you're willy sowy and aren't like snorting lines of coke on the job, you're good. You know?
And once you're there, be willing to adapt to the circumstances. If I could walk through the policy process.
No structure to the actual work. Yeah.
From
no.
idea to reality.
Partly because like they aren't really sure how like what Donald Trump's agenda is going to be, right? Like they are fairly confident that Trump is going to pursue their agenda because they have JD Vance in there, but that's why the first like 100 days is so critical, because they need all of these appointees to like get a bunch of stuff done you know, as quickly as possible. They don't know how much time they got. You know, who knows how long any of these appointees can last if all of a sudden Donald Trump is like, I don't like you very much. You know, like he has gotten rid of an awful lot of folks from his administration just because he decided that he didn't like them, you know? Like, think of how many, like, attorney generals he went through. Like, even like, folks who really had his back, too.
I also served on transition, where many of the, it was all on a table. The world was an open vista, and it was exciting. Then once we got the ideas in the form of executive...
Jack might already have a silent partner. She's not silent, and I love that about her.
Orders, the president sets the agenda, and public servants are there to execute the president's agenda, particularly political appointees. OMB and the White House Domestic Policy Council have an outsized role in coordinating and making sure the president's initiatives are advanced and the agencies implement, and there's a feedback. The agencies give their ideas back to the Domestic Policy Council, in my circumstance, and OMB.
Well, look, also, I do have to say, there's a very decent chance that if you apply and you do have a felony on your record, you could just say, it was a corrupt liberal judge that did it to me. And then, like, everyone who would vet you from, like, a Trump administration would just nod along sagely and be like, yeah, we've all been there, bud. We've all been targeted by a corrupt Biden judge. That's how I lost my children in the divorce. You know, stuff like that.
Once those ideas are fleshed out, it's usually done
It's all
through
lawfare, I
policy
tell you.
implementation with either guidance or, more importantly, regulations. And that could be a 2-year process. Drafting the regulations,
Twitter
getting the public
unbanning
comments
rule, yeah.
in, responding to the public comments, making sure they're legally sufficient and adequate, and then you litigate them. Because if it's anything of real impact...
Also, do you really want, like, Trump ghouls like this guy, like, deciding whether or not your public comments have merit because, like, they've decided they're gonna pass a law that, like, I don't know, means that, like, for every person that they put into a public prison, they have to put, like, 5 in a private one, like some kind of asinine regulation like that. Yeah, like, I don't think that I want this guy deciding whether or not the public relations fallout from that has merit or not. Let me put it that way.
impact, there's going to be some divisions, and we're a very litigious society. It's going to be lawsuits. So you have to plan. Can you get all this done?
Guys, do any of you ever read the title of stream? Like, do any of you read the title of stream sometimes when you show up? Like, I feel like sometimes my stream titles are pretty like, hey, this is what we're gonna do today. And sometimes they're not. Sometimes it's just like, hey, news keeps newsing, huh? But other days I'm like, hey, we're gonna be talking about Project 2025. The fascist plan to take over America. And then like I sometimes see people come in and are like, is this about conservatism? I'm like, yeah. Yeah, just a bit. I don't know, we might touch on some conservative ideas.
From idea to order to regulation to litigation, perhaps up to the Supreme Court.
One of my
as we
strongest
did with the
warriors.
contraceptive mandate. We actually got the regulation and idea and helped the Little Sisters of the Poor and other religious groups not violate their conscience.
What
And
about
the
the
Supreme
Big
Court
Sisters of
decided
the
it
Poor,
within
huh?
4 years. We didn't get all of that within 4 years. And that's one of the biggest lessons of how important you have to plan it all out from the beginning.
Yeah, Roger, that's so well said, and that's so why we're so excited about Project 2025, to try to do as much of that thinking in advance so you can hit the ground running. I wanted to talk a little bit about timing issues.
Yeah, we're gonna do the thinking for you. You won't have to do any thinking at all. Shh. Get the money. Let the moneyed billionaires and mega corporations do all the thinking for you, sweetie, okay? We don't want people who are accidentally bumblefucking their way into supporting policies that would help people when we could be supporting policies that would help, our bottom lines of our donors.
Issues, because you just mentioned that it can take a really long time to get
Little
all the way
Sisters,
through
Big
that
Sisters,
Python
Bioshock?
policy process.
Bioshock that
Can you
game
talk
about
about the importance
conservative
of getting the ground
values?
running a little bit, both the White House and also in agencies? That you hear a lot about the first 100 days or so. How would you categorize that timing?
It's key.
challenge?
Every president has a honeymoon period right after the inauguration. The country's excited. It's either a new person or it's a re-election, but we just got through an election, which is already tough. The president has so much running room in those first 100 days. You have to have an administration
Thanks,
that
Lady
knows
Raincloud.
exactly how to take the reins of power.
The Middle Sisters of the
if
Poor
they're
always
changing
get the
parties in
shaft
particular,
through.
and
I've seen Malcolm in
implementing
the Middle. I
right
know
off
how
the
it
bat.
works.
You don't have that honeymoon period for very long. Maybe 100 days. The American people will give you the chance to perform, and you have to execute and
Well, so like part of what he's talking about here is like how a lot of policies an appointee might put into place, then have a period of public comment, and like you're legally required to like treat those public comments in a certain way, and so like he's telling you what to expect, as if. Well, not as if, but like he's telling you what to expect because frankly, he knows you're going to be pushing some unpopular policies. And as a result of pushing those unpopular policies, people are going to be really mad and they're going to say mean things to you online because it turns out you're not actually saving America. You're making things worse for a whole lot of people, right? So he's setting expectations because a lot of the people who would be coming in a Trump administration scenario, like, they believe they're saving the world, right? Like, they've been told by, like, QAnon, like, cultists for, like, the last 8 years that they're the ones who are going to be saving the world by, passing conservative tax cuts and regulatory cuts for corporations. So oftentimes when met by like a colossal outpouring of antagonism, that is a point of weakness where conservative, normies, who aren't like elected officials, suddenly are like, am I the baddie? Are we the ones doing the bad thing? And they don't want that to be the point where they lose you,
Still keeping me sane on my overnight shifts.
Yo! Dewey Lanstia. I don't know how to pronounce your name. I'm sorry. Thank you for the $50 dono. I very, very, very much appreciate it. Thank you for supporting stream. And yes, I will hydrate. Does anyone have any questions so far? Like, are any of you watching this and you're like, I don't really know what's going on? Like, is there anything I can clarify for you guys? I want to get a feel of where you guys are at. Oh, Mistress Lynn, if you ask a mod to do it, find a mods in Riverboat chat. I think GamerG can change it for you. Yeah, if you guys want name changes, just ask one of the mods in Riverboat chat. How do we shove this guy in a locker? Invent the time machine. Go back to 1987 when he was, just entering middle school. Okay? Then, question mark, question mark, question mark, equals profit. I don't think they're here. Rip. Well, when they come over to Riverboat chat, they can change your username. Yeah.
Prove that you deserve to win that election by fulfilling the promises to the American people. So that's the most frenetic.
What about promises to
time.
Americans
Also, at
that
the
aren't
end,
conservative?
It's also quite frenetic because you want to get as much as you could get in as possible, which means you have to be ready. Everything has to be done at the front end as much as possible, and it requires having the right people in there. Hopefully, people who have been there before. In my experience, it was a learning curve, and that took time. Right, and again, we had an 8-year gap before we switched parties in the White House, and it took some time to get up to speed on some things, but we were able to work hard and get it done. And next time around, we're going to be even more prepared, and I'm excited to see what's in store.
And Aaron, I want to hear from you in a minute, but I would just say to continue to watch and learn on these training videos that'll really equip you, whatever agency you're going into or a White House office, to know what to expect that first day. And knowing what to expect is really half the battle or more than half the battle. And then doing that thinking in advance, which the policy proposals in Project 2025 will do. So I think we get the recipe right. Now we just have to execute on the cooking. But Aaron, what would you say about timing considerations? And
he literally stared into the camera and said, "Let me cook." God damn it. That phrase truly is dead now, isn't it?
how important is it to get that running start for folks that are going to be going right into an agency, for example?
Absolutely. First of all, I think this Project 2025 is unprecedented. Usually it's the transition period where people start putting these things together, and to have something like this ready to roll for someone that comes in is just fantastic. So if you have the opportunity to obviously read all the...
like a Liz Truss? I've been asking that question the entire time. We have to go back in time, hook them up with more black LGBTQ plus and lady friends, also weed. You know what? I like that plan. I like that plan so much better. Like would you go back in time to make somebody awful better? Not would you go back in time to assassinate someone bad, you know? Like, if you just made their circumstances better, you could wind up with a much better outcome. You know, like, that's an interesting concept. That's an interesting concept. Like, make sure someone actually went to, like, Van Gogh goes to therapy instead of, like, you know, cutting off his ear and being all weird. You know, stuff like that. Yeah. An interesting movie? Yeah, for real. Give Donald Trump... Yeah, play catch with Donald Trump as a child. As like a normal a normal, like, 35-year-old man. Okay, all right, okay, shut it down, shut it down. Shut it down. Okay. All right. The idea was good until some people started talking about seducing Hitler. All right. Okay. We're shutting this down. Moving on. Moving on.
Policies that have already been recommendations that have been vetted. I think that's
Dragonfly.
really important. On day one, the first thing you're going to be doing is going into your
Took
to
a
your
great
office
idea and ruined it with Hitler.
working with your manager, supervisor, and your team. And I think you will already sit down and discuss what's going to happen, and you've really got to get going. And just as Roger said, you have every hour counts, and you never know after the first 100 days. Obviously, you're projecting beyond that because you have this full agenda that's been laid out, but then there's always things that could happen. I mean, if we look at President Bush, at all of us, no one knew that 9/11 was going to happen. No one knew that COVID was going to happen. I mean, there are sidewinders that come, and you just don't know, but you want to stay and make sure that you can get these things done.
Life comes at you fast, and you fall down, but then you get up again. Never gonna let you down. Thanks, Liz Truss.
Especially on the first 100 days. That's critical.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. And Aaron, you mentioned earlier about we hope the next conservative administration draws from people from all over, not just from Washington. And that's an adjustment for a lot of people who are out there. So for the person who's watching this from somewhere out in the heartland, maybe they're not even in the policy world, maybe they're a small business person or a lawyer, an accountant.
Maybe they own a snowmobile dealership just outside of Duluth, and they're looking for, something to spice up their life ever since the wife left them and took the kids, and really they haven't been able to recapture that spark of youth they once enjoyed, and they're realizing that the slow march of death is encroaching upon their daily thoughts, and there's nothing holding the darkness at bay anymore. So all you have left really is to throw yourself into the ring for this government position. Take your sadness and rage out on all of the people you oversee. It's government. You can't get fired unless you do something super illegal.
Plumber, whoever it might be that's thinking about what could I add to this, what would be your advice to them?
My advice to them would be to always feel confident that if you have the same, if you're aligned with the president and the conservative movement, everybody is welcome because you have something to add. All skills are welcome here in Washington. And don't be afraid to come to Washington because certainly the conservative movement has a lot more respect for the people outside who bring something, and that's America, and that's
America,
federalism.
baby.
And so what you can bring to Washington is going to have a whole lot of impact, so we welcome you.
Yeah, that's well said. And I think even of the director of Project 2025, Paul Dance, who was a lawyer in New York City. And he was inspired by President Trump and whose administration he served. And he stepped out of that world and into the personnel world. And I think he'll tell you that he's glad that he did, and I know the president is glad that he did for the service that he rendered. And really as you said, the experiences and the outlook that you bring from outside of Washington is so critically important to making the things work. I'll know just one note with President George W. Bush, along with all of the wonderful people he brought came fantastic Tex-Mex, which we really had a dearth of here. But just culturally, this town changes with new administrations. Right. And so come here, breathe some new air, some new life into our
I'm upset. I'm upsetty spaghetti. George W. Bush brought Tex-Mex to Washington, D.C. Oh, God. Changed the culture. Changed the entire culture of the landscape by bringing Tex-Mex to Washington, D.C. Yeah, if we bring Donald Trump to Washington, D.C., what do we get? What culture are you bringing in to Washington, D.C. with Donald Trump? Please elaborate more. I want to know, what's the culinary upside of Donald Trump in this particular circumstance? you introduced this topic. Please follow through on it. What food is done? No, Donald Trump fucking hates bagels, okay? Have you seen him? He's not the kind of guy who likes bagels. He's the kind of guy who gets a bagel and he's like, "Oh man, this hurts my mouth. It's sharp. It has sharp edges on it. I got it lightly toasted because I like my food warm, and now it's got sharp edges, and I'm a big baby about it." That's him right now. Okay? What is he bringing to DC? 10 more McDonald's? 50 more McDonald's? Like what? What food is he bringing? Like Trump steaks? Is that what's at stake here? I'm just asking questions.
Into this capital city, I think, is just so important and so healthy. Roger, anything you'd add on folks
no one
who
had ever
are
had Diet
in a
Coke
different
before
career
he came into
track?
office.
Is it possible to pause and to go in and serve in government service? And what advice would you have?
Yeah, if you have a mindset of being a change agent, that is incredibly attractive for people who are hiring in political positions. You have to be willing to.
Again, I need to really underscore like how this is just a reiteration of everything that this video is about, right? The people who are volunteering to be part of Project 2025 are volunteering to be change agents. Like, they're aware that the fundamental nature of their job is to essentially be a change agent in the name of like fascist, power consolidation. Like they're aware of that. They want that. Why are you spending more breath describing the same thing?
Say, I'm gonna, take my high-paying job and put it on pause, or maybe I'm gonna delay some other life goal I had in order to serve at this moment now to make a difference. And there's so many obstacles. You could have a recalcitrant career employees in an agency that are trying to impede the president's priorities if they disagree. You could have infighting among political appointees as well. So you have to have a thick skin, but you have to have that guiding star of, I want to come serve to help the country and implement the president's policies. And if you have that drive, you're gonna be okay. And one other thing I would add on the personnel side, I saw good people
also,
who had that sort of drive.
I'm not anti-burger. I just don't think Donald Trump likes good burgers. Like, I haven't seen him eat anything and be like, oh yeah, that's good. Like, have any of you ever seen Donald Trump eat something and be like, that's tasty? Yum, yum. Like, I honestly can't, I can't sit and think to myself, oh yeah, this is a guy who has like a family hot dish recipe. This is a guy who, knows how to make his mom's desserts and like has a real fondness for food, I just can't see it. It's one of the ways in which like he's just like this hollow man. Like, what is Donald Trump's favorite music? He's been in the public eye now for like all of his life. What's his favorite music, chat? You don't know? You don't know? Cuz like we know so many things now about Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, and like we know them as like actual human beings as opposed to like pieces of machinery dedicated to like getting political power, Hey, Dark Sir. American politics with weed has become a guilty pleasure as of late. Thank you for deconstructing this fascist. What's a fascist? Fascist messaging. You're welcome, Dark Sir. Also, I'm glad that you're enjoying, and I'm glad that this is both entertaining and intelligible, because sometimes I feel like I'm just sitting here and they're just saying the same stuff over and over again. Because these videos are really kind of like cult indoctrination at the end of the day. Like, you need to be part of our political cult. No disagreement, no No divergence will be tolerated. Fascist. Been having like I need to like do enunciation exercises before I start stream. Sometimes I don't talk very much. I tend to be a pretty quiet person if I'm by myself. So sometimes I just wind up like I guess maybe vocal warm-ups would help, honestly, before I start stream. But like the thing is, I don't think Donald Trump's favorite song is YMCA. I don't think it's Kid Rock music. I don't think it's that guy who sings that he's proud to be an American. I don't think those are his favorite songs at all. I don't think he has favorite music, because I think he's like a psychopath. But hell, even psychopaths can say they have favorite songs. I don't think if asked, he'd be able to name one, you know?
Taken out of consideration
Trump
because they
leads the
said
way.
some irresponsible things on social media. And that's a very important thing to be aware of, that you will be vetted on your history of social media use for the good and the bad. If you've shown courage and grit and stood up for the right conservative principles, that will be a plus factor. If you've done it in a way that is reckless,
Yeah, like Donald Trump has like what I assume to be like live-in chefs, essentially. And like why on earth would you ever have like a McDonald's burger? And he eats them all the time. Like, if you have a good chef, like they should be able to make you like one of the most banging burgers you've ever had in your life. You know, like I'm not a good chef. I'm not good at cooking things necessarily. I can make tasty things, but like I'm not good at it. I just find it fun. And like when I make burgers at home, they fuck, man. Like they're so good.
that may be a negative factor. So be very sensitive to what you do in social media.
That's a really good tip. And I'd say, too, that President Reagan had a sign on his desk that really everybody should have when they're serving an administration, which is there is no limit to what you can accomplish if you don't care who gets the credit. And I think that's so true, that when you're having success, spreading around the accolades is really, really important. And just remember, it's not about you, it's about
I got great buns.
the president and the country ultimately. And I think that's one of the things I think we should end on is you both are now here full-time at the Heritage Foundation. Your work is to try to help save this country. Our president likes to remind all of us that there really is kind of a narrow window here we have to turn things around. So can you speak, maybe Roger, I'll start with you. Can you speak to the urgency of this moment and why, even if it's hard for people to understand how this might fit in their career, why it's just so important that people do step forward and serve at this time?
In short, the country is at stake. The winds of cultural change have been going in the progressive liberal side for decades, and the only way to stop it is getting back the reins of power at the federal government. The liberal behemoth has
Again, what is shocking to me about this is he's basically like been talking, oh, you can do so much good. You can do so much good for the country. You can do so much good for the country. We need to take back power, okay? The executive branch, we need to consolidate power into its hands so that Donald Trump can become a dictator and save all of us, okay? The only way forward is for us to end democracy, put dictatorial power into Donald Trump's hands, and I'm sure that he is basically just going to be a benevolent and good dictator. Nothing bad is going to happen. And then he's going to pull a Cincinnatus, okay? We're going to just get democracy again when he dies of old age, okay? But, like, you know that's not what would happen. Like, if you're even half awake, you know that Donald Trump, even if we granted a bunch of these things, you know that Donald Trump would, like, hand the empire off to his son, right? Like, he'd keep the political power in the family. You're never getting this country back if he takes power again. You know?
Use the federal government to pursue its aims with a vengeance, and that's where the main fight is. And we need folks of great, solid conservative principles, of integrity, to step up and serve to take the country back.
Yeah, well said. Aaron, anything you'd add to that?
Just on the international side, I think it's from a national security side, we've never had a greater threat than we do now, which is China, and I think that we need to recognize that. I had an opportunity to live there with the last firm that I was with, and
you don't have to order them from.
I think it's very clear ideologically what our differences are, and it just integrates. It's not foreign policy versus domestic policy.
McDonald's
it's
is a
all
sometimes
one now,
food.
and I think that we need to see what's happened here in the United States, and as Roger said, move forward on a conservative track, because it's very clear what the next steps have to be.
Well said, and I think I just end by saying, if you are a person of good character, solid conservative, if you decide you can't join this project, then think about there's someone else that is going to do that. We'd rather it be you. Thank you for watching this session. We hope you'll watch all the sessions to be as prepared as possible if the American people do give us a conservative project.
I'm preparing my entire audience for you guys. Don't you worry. I feel like this guy looks like somebody, like an actor. Like he looks like evil Ross from Friends or something. Do you guys see it? Do you guys see my comparison? Yeah? Okay, cool.
President. Thanks very much for listening.
He has Michael Knowles energy. Yeah, Ross from Friends had Michael Knowles energy. There we go. God. All right. So, what can we take away from that? Like, essentially, they're just saying, hey, you can do so much good. You'll be able to wield so much power once you get into office. And, you know, just don't do anything illegal. And we'll have your back. And, you know, if you feel like you can't do the job, you know somebody else who can. But you know what? You can probably do the job, all right? You could probably do it. Just don't do anything illegal, all right?